that, I'm trying to show this to Sophia.
Thank you everyone for being here. I want to start by thanking my colleagues, Professor Kennedy, Professor Luna, and Professor Bird. Everyone that helped me put this together, thank you. I'm going to take you on a little trip to Copenhagen. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit about how technological advances keep changing. And transportation infrastructure is really vulnerable to these changes. And as they change, the urban fabric changes with them. If we don't change, and if they don't adapt to these technological advances, they can become overlooked, abandoned, and negative spaces for cities. So how can we reappropriate these spaces and create a positive space for these cities? Sorry about that. Okay. So as you all know, New York did a fantastic job with the High Line, reappropriating the tracks and creating a park that connects the whole city. Dallas created a park over the highway where you used to have voids. In Chicago, I didn't notice. I've been to the park, and in Chicago, I learned through my research that it was also a train track and a parking lot where now a great public amenity sits. There are proposals for the 11th Street Bridge in DC to have a better connection between two parts of the city that are completely disconnected. In Seattle, the Freeway Park, a park that starts layering with the highways. The Olympic Sculpture Park in Seattle as well. And this is another intervention, a little bit at a smaller scale, that we were also, I guess I should backtrack a little bit. I got to visit Copenhagen last summer, and this is when I first came in contact with the site. But we also came to the Museum by Big, the Maritime Museum, which is located in a dry dock, and it really celebrates that history of the maritime while creating and enhancing the space. So what this thesis proposes is to connect and integrate Copenhagen's metropolitan zone, which I will explain a little further what that entails, by appropriating 3 voids that are located right in front of the central train station in the city, celebrating the layers of history, and providing the city with a public amenity. So, as you can see over here, this is the medieval part of Copenhagen. And over here we have a residential district, and this is what we call the metropolitan zone. Central train station and the Tivoli Gardens, which is a destination, an international destination. You step outside the station, and this is what you see. These voids that have been obviously left abandoned. As you walk around the voids, you get the sense of the smell of urine. I learned also that that's where drug exchanges occur. It's a negative space in the heart of Copenhagen. And as I mentioned, there are 3 voids, as you can see here. So, and these ones, you're looking at these ones right now. So how to heal these scars that are left by the transportation infrastructure in the city, particularly in Copenhagen? And the idea here is to reappropriate them by using public space. Reading a lot about Jan Gel's writing and research. He is from this city, and he explains the importance of public space. And in particular in Copenhagen, which is a place where they really value and cherish public space. So let's go back a little bit in history. In the 1500s, the city was by, dramatic changes in the urban plan. Infill, they extended over to the other side. A fortification wall appeared, as you can see here. And in the 1900s, that fortification wall was taken out. And Copenhagen was faced with the decision of what to do with that space. And there was a lot of negotiation in order to get that land to become a green ring around the city. And these are some of the green spaces that you can see. So the fortification wall came through here, and those are the green parks that now celebrate that history that was at the time. As you can see, the three voids are located within the path of that fortification wall. So as I was doing my research and my design, I thought to myself, how can we allow the history of what this site has become, which is a green ring, to come through these voids as well. Also, I found out that there used to be other voids within that path. They were actually covered up to enlarge the street and provide more access for vehicles. Now something that's hurting the metropolitan zone of Copenhagen. So how can we avoid this happening when reappropriating these three voids? So as you can see, this is the central train station here. This is what we were rented. These are the three voids, the parks, and starting to see how we can capture that connection, but in addition, how we can capture the connection to the medieval part of the city. Copenhagen has a history of pedestrianizing streets. And the Stroget is one of the streets that was pedestrianized, and within it, several plazas and public spaces. While researching these plazas and public spaces, I learned that they used to be, some of them used to be dominated by vehicles. And as well, they were pedestrianized. Some of them used to be markets, so the history of each one is very different, but they all line up in these pedestrian strogets. So how can this stroget start moving into the space in front of the station and start not only pulling people from the medieval city onto the metropolitan zone, but vice versa. So this is the metropolitan zone. It has the Tivoli Garden, the station. It's mostly commercial, cultural, entertainment, very few residences in this space. And it's a space that's surrounded and bisected by moving and physical barriers. The physical barriers identified as the 3 points. The moving barriers as the amount of traffic that is in this space. So like I said previously, located between the medieval city and the housing district. So the challenge is, how do we convert these voids that are seen as barriers and allow for connectivity? So I want to zoom in and just take you through a couple of images of what you actually see when you're walking on the site. So that's the void, tons and tons of bicycles parked around it. That's the view of the station, and that's the void right in front of it. This is the second void, right over here. So as I mentioned before, these spaces are negative spaces in the city. Another challenge is that there's lack of public space within the metropolitan zone. And in addition, a space for gathering right in front of the station. When you exit the station, you're immediately faced with traffic going through, like right outside the door. There's no space to come, rest, or meet with someone. People sitting on the sidewalk, but there's really no gathering space. So there's a lot of opportunities in the metropolitan zone. There's 20,000 people working there currently. 50 million people visit the metropolitan zone per year. In addition, there's 6,500 car parking spaces, and the city is looking to reduce that amount. And 5,000 parked bicycles, but only 3,500 bicycle routes. So there's a little bit of a gap there. As you can see, 3,500 of those bikes park around the station. So you can imagine if you got there early and that's your bike, you're probably walking home. These voids have been identified not only by the city, but by the owners and the community. And they wrote a document in Danish, which I ended up translating, and to understand what they wanted to see in these voids. And these are the ones that were identified. I began this study by looking at the void right in front of the station, but then realized that they were really connected. The three voids were connected to each other. Most of the proposals, not really proposals, but ideas that were given out for this space, were really treating the voids as separate identities. So how can you, one of the questions I asked myself is how can I integrate the three and connect them to propose an intervention? And in such a complicated site, a transportation hub, as well as a place where there's so many jobs and people moving around, and there's a lot of tourism, it's surrounded by hotels. How can all these programs that are juxtaposed together work on a site like this? So let me take you through a series of strategies that set the framework for the design. By extending the forecourt of the station and creating a street over the first void, you're able to have a space of gatherings, a public space right in front of the station. In addition, the station currently has car streets going through all around it. Not necessary, and following the history of Copenhagen in pedestrianizing the streets, the idea here is to integrate this street within the space and allow the vehicles to just come through and out. As you can see, the Liberty Monument is located in an island between a large four-lane road. And this four-lane road, I actually found out that this intersection is extremely dangerous. There's a lot of accidents that occur here. So by extending the sidewalk and integrating the monument with the sidewalk of this building, creating a space right in front of the station as well, you allow for this connection to occur, for pedestrians to have easier access onto the station, as well as provide the monument with a space, rather than just something laying in the street. There's an opportunity in opening up this building to create that connection between the three voids. And then this used to be is a parking lot that has a car rental building. By taking that away and turning this into a public space, the pedestrian and bicycle movement and connectivity can start moving along in this direction. So, let me go back. Sorry. As I said, one of the issues is the bicycle parking. And after doing some research, I learned that Japan is actually on the forefront of the technology for parking. And so this is what I discovered, the ecosystem. It basically takes your bicycle, takes it underground, and parks it for you. So each of these silos can hold 200 bicycles. And after studying where there is lack of bicycle parking, and where there is more traffic of bicycles, I came up with these locations here, where these silos can also be located to account for the 1,500 lack of bicycle routes. And on the initial void, 2 of those would be located, and you can find others right there. So in this thesis, I'm proposing an idea for the whole site. I'm focused specifically on this space. In Copenhagen, rain or snow, people are hiking. Over 20,000 cyclists pass through the boulevard line, which is that line where the voids are, a day. So in addition to start connecting, mirroring what the train tracks are doing underground, a bike lane and a pedestrian lane move through the site up and under. Okay. So before I move through to the boards, I just want to emphasize that the idea here with this thesis is to really provide a space that welcomes visitors to Copenhagen, if that's the first space that you're looking at when you exit the station, but also a space that serves the residents of the city. Okay. So I'm going to move through here and talk to you a little bit about the program. What the city wanted to see in this space is a visitor center. Currently, the visitor center is located in this building right here, in a small retail space, not really accessible to the tourists. So the program that's proposed here is that visitor center, but in addition with a restaurant on the ground level, or on the train track level, to provide also an amenity for the residents. The idea here is that these bridges can go above and under and start capturing the spaces that are underneath these buildings to create exhibits for, and to create a transportation museum of sorts. And down here, I can imagine a train exhibit in this space. As we move through, you can move through under, and you arrive at the same space. There's an opportunity for an outdoor cinema. This building over here, which some of the people in Copenhagen want to demolish it because it has what they call a dead facade, while others want to preserve it, I can see that we can capture the value of it by allowing this dead facade to become an outdoor theater. And so we're setting up this stage for that to happen. In addition, a building that serves to celebrate the bicycle culture, the bicycle transportation, the bicycle history in the city and on its own. We visited a bicycle exhibit while in Scandinavia. It was a fantastic experience. And then I could see another building that could serve more for community purposes, daycares that maybe people that work around the space can come and drop off their kids, or it could serve more for the community. So you have that juxtaposition of the program. So as you can see in the building, in the ground level, this is where you can access the bicycle parking, and you can bring down your bicycle. And this is the visitor center. And then on the level that's at the level of the trains, you have a restaurant. And this is where you can see, I don't know if you can all see here, but this is where you can see the silos. So in the video, the silos are underground, and what I'm proposing is that the skin of that silo is glass, so that while you're in the space, you can see the bicycles coming up. Some of the details of how the building can start absorbing the bicycle parking with the skin and the structure. I guess I would like to open it up
Westbury trains anymore?
Yes. So it's an active station.
Have you been moving some of the tracks?
No, no. So I found out that there was a recent renovation to the tracks where they all are joined in this space here. And they converge into 2 lanes that appear between the 2. That's why the intervention is only happening on this side.
Sophie, where's this from?
This is a section cut in here.
So that's the train station on the right?
Can you talk to us about the materials you're using for the visitor center? Is it more steel?
Yeah, I thought about using concrete and glass similar to the buildings that we saw while we were there, but really allowing the building to just be a facade that just drops your eye down into the tracks.
So if I'm walking, how do I enter and exit that visitor center?
Over here. So you walk in, so this is the sidewalk, this is the station. You come out of the station and you enter through here. You can take the stairs down onto the restaurant, so when the visitor center is closed, you can still access the restaurant. In addition, you can take this ramp down onto this space and then come into the restaurant.
So these two questions, are the trains electric? And what's the acoustic quality of those?
So the acoustic quality is loud, but I imagine that being part of the experience. And they are electric.
So I assume they were loud. So how did you think about that in terms of the building that's coming down and it's glass and it's next to the tracks?
Yeah, so the
Think about
building,
that issue?
yeah, the building is, let me see if I have to show. You can see over here, the building is set up. It's not immediately on the same level, but it's above. And I mean, it's something that it would have to be part of the experience to have the sound.
But it's not, it's electric, so we don't have fumes.
No, no. Which is why the boards aren't really needed anymore, right?
Right.
Does the one bike path go up in the air?
No, it's on ground, so it's a bridge that takes you through. So this is at level with the grade. And then this one goes under.
Now, the backdrop of your visitor center, is that building 17? So what is the white backdrop?
This one here,
No, the bottom.
oh, this one here, this is a hotel and this is a bank.
So we have pictures of how it looks. I'm just curious how it
I
looks.
might have had it in the PowerPoint, I can
Okay.
Yeah, no.
So in this map here, which one are we looking at? The last one?
So this is the central train station, right here. This is the visitor center. The bridge that takes you through, and then the bridge that takes you under. Then you cut through, and this becomes the plaza.
So where is that?
This, right here.
Four.
Yeah. And,
So like a glass curtain wall?
and the hotel has a restaurant that they've done, they've tried to put tables around the sidewalk, but allowing this to open up to that space would really serve that hotel. And then the bank, they all have access through here.
People who drive, and
So not a lot of people drive in the city, yeah. Bicycle and taxis. There is street parking, and they are trying to reduce that amount of street
so if
parking.
I'm a visitor and I drive and go to weekend, I should park somewhere and then come to the visitor center.
And rent a bike.
I can rent a bike there.
So the second block is fully covered already.
Yes, yeah.
How do you make decisions about how much then of the remainder 3 that you cover and how much you left over?
Yeah,
See, it's kind of progression, why?
it was an exploration of either developing the three voids completely, but I came to the decision that I really wanted to celebrate the history. There's a reason why these voids are still there, and they are part of the fabric of the city. So how can you, and taking note from this project in the dry dock, they left the dry dock there. They didn't just cover it up with a museum, but they tried to include it. And so by doing this, you're allowing people visitors to have the Copenhagen experience of driving a bike around a park that maybe they feel more safe than in the streets, but they do go pretty fast. But yeah, so.
I kind of want to embrace that idea. I'm not sure I do. You started off with the premise that you have been shortage of respect policy. Public space. A lot of open space.
Yeah.
A lot of open space. So I sort of wonder, what would you have done? Well, I wonder two things. First, you did choose to place buildings.
Yes.
And so maybe talk a little bit about your decision to do that.
Sure.
And then it's just my own wonder, is that space valuable enough? I mean, or is that idea of the preservation of the realization that those train tracks are passing under there, in the ways that comes out of it? Do you get enough out of that? I wonder what you might have done if you imagined this all as new, positive, public,
Yeah.
usable space that accomplishes all the things that
Sure.
say you ought to places that
Sure.
encourage people to linger, interact. So two, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
And
sure.
Maybe talk a little bit about your decision on where to place buildings.
Okay, yeah. This street here, so first this building, the location has to do with the tracks that are there. And in addition, to not impede on the view of the station and to not impede on that connection between the station and the Liberty Line. So to really start framing that space, that's why this one is located there. And then these two buildings, this is a street that is highly trafficked by bicycles over here. And it leads onto the lakes right over here. So it's really capturing on that amenity. And the decision to locate these buildings right there was because of that.
And that's a museum and culture.
Yeah. And I think I saw a lot of studies that some of them completely covered the voids. Some of them constructed high-rises over the voids. I mean, it was a tough decision to figure out how much to give out and to give away, but I think that the fact that I want to preserve that history is celebrated, and celebrated with a museum of transportation, that these voids should really be open. Because by covering them up and then saying this will be a museum of transportation, we're not really giving that full exhibit of what this will be.
So I think this is a really wonderfully executed project, and I really appreciate the clarity of your presentation, both visually and walk us through your research. I think for me there are maybe two things that I'm missing that I think would help with addressing some of these questions. One is in your presentation of the precedents, a little bit more critical analysis of what was successful and what wasn't successful about those, or what it took to make those happen and what the effect was. So things like, some of those have had safety concerns associated with them because of their separation with their isolation, and others took a certain kind of financial leveraging that had an impact on what the program was, like the theme park. And so I think, and others have had a kind of questionable relationship to the neighborhoods around them, like what's going to be the social implications, like the DC 11th Street Bridge. So a little bit of that kind of how do you pull what's good or what's difficult about those kinds of how you, I think it would also help to say, okay, these are the critical tensions and the critical programs that would make a space like this feasible and would kind of make it exciting. I think spatially, to me, one of the really critical moves is this move to say, I'm leaving some of this space open. It raises some challenges, some questions for me in terms of whether this would become the kind of social center that you might be looking for. But I think it's an interesting move in terms of creating creating an interesting section in the space that you could work with. And it sets up a difficult relationship between the speed of the train and the kind of pieces you're arguing for. But that could become a good tension. I mean, it could be something that you use in terms of maybe you design a facade that responds in a certain way when the train goes by. But I do think it's a really, it's kind of a challenge that maybe needs a little bit more attention.
There's a highway in lower New York State that runs east-west through a valley, and the roadway is elevated, and it keeps crisscrossing the street. Although it's one of the most beautiful drives I've ever been on. And so the speaker approach that you've taken, I think, is entirely appropriate in the sense of reviewing the history of infrastructure, introducing the weaving not only below but also through the building as well. To me, is an experience that is expressed by the pathway moving along. In a sense, to take a lighter touch on the buildings, to me, I think it's appropriate, so we don't overwhelm process. I wish you had a 3D physical model of that, because that's what I'm missing, is this true understanding of the spatial qualities of what you have. So there's not enough second cut sort of for me to fully understand how it's always working, because these are kind of slices that going back to the brain.
I completely agree.
Talking about there is, you get slices, it's hard to
The way that could have worked would have been to, given the climate, did you ever consider putting cover over, for example, this one here, so that could be like a kind of crystal palace kind of thing where you could, see the trains, which are really interested in seeing that at street level, but that might be a station too, so it could come up and down through there. It might work with the climate, but it wouldn't be a place that would be kind of cold and snowy so much in the year, but it could be an outdoor room. It's a station as well. Maybe some of the platforms could be moved into it. Think about this space right here, where, the first space there,
Okay,
where
this one.
instead of it being open to the elements, they have a kind of, almost a crystalline kind of train shed.
So that was exactly the idea, actually, and I think that this image up here might show it better. That's the building, and the reason why it's glass is so that you can be protected.
But I'm talking about the whole thing, so
Oh,
that
okay.
maybe the trains could have platforms up there, so that maybe commuter trains or something could stop there and come up inside this big glass.
Okay.
Because it's not, as far as I know with the station, is there a big train shed hall? I don't know.
Yes.
There
The
is.
second is-
Gorgeous.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate, but if there was a place where commuter trains could do that in the wintertime, that might also be a way to make that space something that is habitable as well.
What you're describing could work very well in the other two smaller ones.
So the other-
Because there are stations there, just, 2 or 3 blocks up. That's a station.
Well, you could cover that in
Yeah,
glass,
same.
it'd be quite dramatic, lit up, and go down, and maybe that's one stop before you get to the station for commuter train or something, so that the cut makes sense, with the kind of pieces of art, which is this classic station.
Actually, we've done that with all of the buildings, there to contrast them with
kind of glass, kind of almost a tail.
Series of beacons, it's very much like the Kresge Museum. But they vary along the edge. The glass eats out, comes out.
Atkins.
Kansas.
The Atkins.
Because this is very similar to that in a lot of respects.
Also has some movement. I mean, the other way I could have interpreted this is that it's all about movement. Because I think, Copenhagen sets models for a lot of things. One of them is public space that encourages you to linger, activating places that were originally for movement and really all about pause. But maybe even more extraordinary about Copenhagen is the way it embraces and encourages bicycle movement. And so I could almost see, and I do, love this weave up and down. Maybe if, it's really all about that. This piece is about movement, it's a cross-axis to your other about walking and about lingering. And then I began to like it as a kind of model of an idea, all about movement and the embrace of the bicycle culture. I got to admit, that bike side of it, I've never seen it. It's spectacular, and the idea to just see it well enough. So I would, when I see it now, I'd like to talk all about it. Embrace the bicycle culture. It's so powerful. It's so wonderful.
I wish you would have collaborated the museum, because Copenhagen is about bicycle. Building your creative your bicycle museum. I would love to see how you could have incorporated the silos, like you did the visitor center, maybe something there to end there, or not a termination to your movement.
Yeah.
Because that could have been like, it is what it is. This is the
And
main
the
thing.
building.
Celebrate the bicycle, celebrate the movement you created, and that's one of the access points. It was really,
There's something interesting about the residue of this curve, that you talked about there, that it belongs to the evolution of the urban form of the city. And I think I might have, maybe you tried this, but maybe a strategy where that is memorialized more continuously by, I think you're trying to memorialize with the bike path there, and I think maybe instead of the small orange pavilions that you have,
Yeah.
I think probably a building that's more continuous there. Could even have different functions. Some might be a train station, some might be decked over and be a meeting hall or something that memorializes the continuity of that strip. Instead of the individual pieces, then, because I was with you when you were talking about that, how it was part of the kind of way the city evolves and things. And it just makes me think that by adding, I think for you, the blue bike lane is the thing that provides the continuity, which I think would be a really interesting experience in the summer. Although I know these so hardy people, they ride their bikes all the time. They're much better than Americans at that sort of thing. But I think maybe a building or a form or approach that had more continuity to it would mark that place in an emphatic way. It wouldn't necessarily have to be the same function.
And attenuated, it could be that it's making streets. I mean, turning these into building lots of streets on the other side as opposed to open-ended streets and really, and it's all kind of attenuated, stretched.
It's a very delicate touch.
It's a delicate touch.
Very delicate touch, because those two buildings, the only thing that bother me is because they sort of,
Yeah,
they
got this
really
space,
stop
yeah,
the
it's
flow.
true.
You've gone through the buildings, which I think is interesting in that aspect, but it really stops the space. In fact, the space is there. Okay.
Yeah.
I think you are.
I think the question part of this city is the, of what you've done, I think, is the scale, human scale that you've introduced into a very large scale part of the city. And it's a part of the city where this train transportation is kind of predominant, it's kind of a barrier. So I think you managed to put together the kind of huge scale of the train, but the more human scale of bikes and the pedestrian version. And I guess that there's been a lot of discussion about buildings, and it'd be very nice to scale where I think they are now in this pedestrian scale. And another, I think, interesting aspect of this is that the project makes visible and celebrates Copenhagen's commitment to this multimodal transit, to this human-powered transit, to this sustainable means of transit. And I think that celebration is very important. So whereas we can all argue about whether it makes sense to leave it uncovered, like find new space, it created such a beautiful theater and performance that's all about this kind of spirit of Copenhagen. I think that's very important and a real justification for opening it up and creating.
How wide are your buses?
So each one is 4 feet wide, and so 4 feet and 4 feet in the other direction.
You found that to be the absolute
Yes.
minimum size?
Yes.
Only in very tight.
Okay.
So it would be the minimum 60.
Okay.
Particularly with the total bicycle pattern.
You would have.
And they're all talking to each other as they're riding their bikes.
Yes, I mean, there are 2 or 3 abreast, moving in one way. So,
Yeah.
the other thing is this other pathway, in a sense, the one in yellow,
Yes, this ribbon.
is kind of thrown in almost as an afterthought. And can you tell us more about that and why you chose to highlight that, but
Sure.
yet not incorporate it very much?
Sure.
Because it shows up here, it shows up in the sketches. I don't see it connecting any more than just the one spot. Whereas it appears that it could also go connect to the former outlet
Yeah.
in a number of other locations.
So the street is already pedestrianized. Bicycles are not allowed in the space. But what interests me here was that stream of public spaces and how the space right in front of the station can become part of that stream. The research that I did some schemes that completely pedestrianize this area of the street, which connects over, so kind of continuing that pedestrian street through. But it is a transportation hub, and you do need car traffic. So by extending the sidewalk, which ended here, and the monument was in the center, by extending the sidewalk, limiting that traffic, you allow more pedestrian connection to come through.
So
West
is the
9.
intention to stop pedestrian traffic on that road? Or continue it on? to the-
Well, at this point, this would be the end space, which is the same thing that this one's doing here.
So you've got a monument as an obelisk, and how then you shape that space to have it rotate and turn.
Yeah.
It's a big question. Yeah. So
So-
how that sidewalk is formed becomes very crucial to stopping this, because it appears to me like it's meant to be
To continue on this way.
Yes.
Okay.
It's almost made to appear as if it's a part of the extension or something. And that's why I was wondering why
Yeah.
it
just
did
up
stop there.
Yeah.
And it's all about the shape of that sidewalk.
Yeah, I think it would be an incredible experience to be down at this level, seeing the trains going by. Because looking down on them from an upper level is one sort of experience. But actually being at the same level, I think there's a sense of movement, a sense of sensation there. And I think you could probably solve the acoustic issues and vibration issues, would not be a cheap thing to do. But the idea of being at that level and looking out and seeing all these trains coming by would really be a fantastic experience and very memorable. It might have been something that could inform the rest of the buildings that maybe they would have that kind of experience. It might be design the rest of the buildings and that cut. But the thing too is that about things like this, which is amazing to me in a place like Copenhagen, where they're obviously much smarter about their cities than we are probably. It's amazing to me that this has never been covered and built over. And I wonder, Peter, why is that? How is it that this center of the city, such valuable real estate next to Tivoli Gardens, you know, in the middle of one of Europe's most beautiful cities, is like this? How does that happen?
I don't know why it hasn't happened yet, but it's about ready to happen. It's going to happen soon. So there are proposals that are different than some.
I think the conversation is starting, and so far the municipality has done studies. There's no real proposals. Seeing how Copenhagen usually does things, there's probably going to be a competition for whatever happens in the space. But yeah, it's interesting that, you know.
Because in New York, it was a visionary real estate with Grand Central. I mean, it was, you know, there was nothing there. And they did it to sort of create value in real estate.
Well, it's happened further out, and it's creeping closer to the head station.
And I also have to say that looking at the research, these words are located in a neglected space of the city, the metropolitan zone, which has just recently been identified as an issue.
But
So,
within a block of Tivoli Gardens, which is one of the most famous
yes,
outdoor spaces in the world.
I think maybe it was acting as the back of it. So the Tivoli Gardens was on the edge of the medieval city, and that space was just
You know,
back
it's interesting. Places that are the most interesting cities are really the seams between things. This is obviously the city. So to make that, it's a lot of times is where we have our shopping districts and things like that because they bring neighborhoods together. But in this case, it was seen as a negative. I think by turning it into this continuous series of not only historic, but also
They're really good.
okay. It was an evolving title, and that's
Well, because I think it's actually more specific. I think what you're doing is you're investigating the creation of multimodal space in Copenhagen. And I think because when you look at the context pieces that you're putting together, they're all kind of mono-function, or you've described the orange space as a series of plazas that are not building and they're not bicycle, they're not car, they're just pedestrian. Or the other spaces are only trains or only building. And I think you're proposing a kind of hybrid that what if it could be building and it could be pedestrian and it could be bicycles and trains all woven together very carefully. And I think if when you think about it that way, then you start to say, well, your sections can't look like flat spaces. They have to be much more integrated of how can this one speed be reconciled with this other space, and how can this create a new type of public space that's much more interwoven?
So that
I'm sorry?
is much to the right. The model.
Yes.
Is that back? Is that?
Oh, this is a 3D printer? Yeah. Do you want to see it?
What?
Okay.
It's a little drawer.
Okay.
So it's plexiglass in it.
Right, so but you didn't take 3 dimensions all the way down.
No,
So you
yeah.
can have-
Well, yeah, because of the scale.
What is this tall?
That is SAS.
SAS Hotel, right on the opposite.
There's a 3D printer with algorithms.
To go under. Yeah. Yeah, because of the scale, the under part was just that.
I know it's
But I could have exaggerated to really make that big.
There's something, one of the things I've been thinking about here, and is that the emphasis is on the connection of the arc. And I wonder if you have, and what you would discover on thinking about, more like that center zone. What happens, what's the experience of those streets now, when they were crossing before, but you looked on either side and saw those voids. So how does the experience
Of these
against the green have changed as a result of the stitching that you did this way? And so I think you've been focusing so much on this, and were you to have more time to explore that cross-grain connection, it yield some really interesting ideas about how to develop like the plaza around the obelisk and the space in front of the train, and get a sense of these two parts of the city which were connected, but which just probably wasn't very pleasant to walk across, and what that other view could yield. Perhaps you did look at that, but I noticed you're trying to very much emphasizing
On that, yeah.
on the line, and it seems there's a space to explore another way of understanding the city as a result of this integration. Okay, up and down.
So Sophie's committee was Professor Suman and Luigi Peter Noonan. If either of you would like to say something, this is the moment.
So I'll make a quick comment and turn it over to Ellen. I just want to commend Sophie on, she was kind of beyond the work itself and the comments you've heard and about to hear. Traveling to Scandinavia and embracing the education abroad experience, I think, was crucial to your thesis. So I think that was important, embracing the light culture, how people live in this part of the world. And then more importantly, bringing that back to your colleagues and faculty and the school community here, I think is a great model for education. Going out into the world, finding out about it, and then bringing that knowledge and experience and drive and dedication back into the thesis process should be commended and is a great model for students to see.
Well, thank you. I want to thank our guests. I think it was a wonderful discussion, great comments. I want to also thank the committee, Professor Hurd, Peter Newman, myself. I think, I'm just referring to some of the highlights of the questions and issues that were raised that are really critical is starting with like a critical analysis of precedents. Now, you have been looking at those precedents and some of those studies already in place, but probably introducing, examining them would set the stage as how you're trying to frame your own project. But the more we study precedents, the more we can verify them and are designed to inform. There was a discussion of how much we can look at these sites as real estate and how much of buildings we can put on there or not, like how much of that can be covered or not. That was a question that we were investigating, and we had research on that. She found projects and proposals that already suggesting to put like massive buildings, shopping malls that are covering that. But she was looking at this more as a process. She started the whole journey by going with Peter into study abroad, and the seed of the interest and the project was probably from that trip. She looked at this site, was very interested, but there's also a lot of important questions attached to it. And she stepped back and looked at like the broader picture, like what are the bigger issues that involves and can be involved in this. She found like the issue of urban environment as something that is evolving. The site as a very complex and multi-layered issue. And also intervention, that much of that is through landscape here. How can we look at it more as a process? And definitely her approach here has been like more subtle. And one of the discussions that we had definitely was, one of the factors was actually a multimodal mobility hub. She finally chose bus space because she was imagining the bus space just adds more space for life, living, mobility, etc., etc. But the subtle approach here to the landscape, I think it's an interesting thing because it raises a lot of great questions, challenges, but at the same time, on the positive side of it, it allows us to engage the city in a more incremental way so that we can have time to reflect in the city to make more informed decisions for the future. And I think the fact that we have been dealing with mobility, with transportation, looking at the city and those layers as different texts and being able to read them simultaneously was very wonderful. At a personal note, I really appreciate your inclusiveness, curiosity, and being curious to experiment.